Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Friday edition, kind of weekend edition here for Point of View, and we're so grateful you can join us. And over the next couple hours, going to cover a lot of different topics. And of course, as you know, we're coming to the end of our Truth Team Week. The theme this week is Committed to Truth, and we know that you are in that regard. We have in studio with us today Dr. Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation. Of course, Kelly Shackelford, CEO and Chief Counsel for First Liberty Institute. And I know what Kelly's going to be doing tomorrow, and that is, if you have not heard us mention before, he's a graduate of Baylor, and it was so disappointing last year when they didn't have March Madness, because I thought Baylor was going to do very well that year. Baylor is doing very well so far, right?
So far, so good. They've actually got, I think they're one of three teams with both their men and their women's team are in the Sweet 16. So that's so far so good for the Baylor Bears this year.
And I know what you will be doing, watching them when they play tomorrow afternoon. But I wanted to use that to get into a topic which I thought was kind of interesting, because another team that's playing tomorrow afternoon was a Cinderella dream for Sir Oral Roberts' Golden Eagles. Now, you got to love the fact that they beat Ohio State. They beat the Florida Gators. Nobody saw that coming. Talk about bracket busting. But then you had this editorial that appeared in USA Today from this woman who said that she really doesn't think Oral Roberts should even be allowed to participate in the NCAA tournament because the players adhere to traditional Christian values. So they're going after Oral Roberts, but they could be going after Baylor. And, of course, Liberty University almost won their game. So there is a level of intolerance showing up in, of all places, March Madness.
Well, yeah, and it shows you the kind of danger of, the first thing I see with this is how far we've drifted. When people have not even any shame in being a public religious bigot.
Yes.
Which is exactly what this was. Mm-hmm. The idea is we actually founded this country so people could come that had different religious beliefs and still live at peace. And so people who want to force everybody who has different religious beliefs to not participate, to not be allowed, it goes against what America is all about more than anything. But it kind of links in also with what's going on in South Dakota, right? You got the NCAA,
there you go.
You got transgender, and I'll tell you, the thing that I'd love to see a poll on this. But the thing that I think is I have zero doubt about, if you polled the American people and said, would you like to keep all this stuff out of sports where you can just, have your kids participate and not have to everything be politicized? I think you'd have a really high percentage of people who say, why don't we just let them play basketball? And why don't we just let them play football? And why don't you keep your politics and everything else out of the basketball game? Mm-hmm. And I think people are getting tired of the fact that there's almost nowhere in life they can go without everything turning into some sort of political battle. Why don't we just enjoy good athleticism and people giving all they have and character? But it's hard to do these days.
You know, one of the arguments, Dr. Merrill Matthews, was that these views that are held at Oral Roberts are wildly out of line with modern society. Now, you would think, well, maybe they're holding to some kind of racial standards. By the way, 11 of the 16 players on the ORU men's basketball team are men of color. So first of all, you can see that's not the case. They go there voluntarily, and they know basically that they have to uphold certain Christian standards. And by holding up to that, you have this editorial that has been reverberating all through the NCAA this week on USA Today.
And this is a concern because of where it could ultimately lead to. This is the first step. And so in the country, we have this issue of income inequality.
Yeah.
My goodness. Well, what do we have if we have basketball point inequality? You can't have something like that because it implies some people are doing much better than others, and so we'd have to take certain points away from the others. I'm being a little facetious, but only a little bit.
Yes,
because we were 10 years ago, we might not have thought we'd ever come to some of these things that we're seeing now, and yet we are seeing this begin to happen, and it's beginning to filter into sports, and who knows what you're going to see later. The problem that they have with sports, though, is especially in basketball, it's heavily minority. I mean, white people have trouble getting on the team a lot of times. If you're going to be balanced on this, it's just amazing that sports has been the ultimate meritocracy so far.
Right.
And we like it for that because we get good sports from that. And I don't know where this is ultimately going to go, but this looks like a first step in the door.
And you've heard it before, if you count by race, well, look at hockey. It's disproportionately white. Look at basketball, disproportionately black. Gary Bauer put it this way. He was on with us earlier in the week, and we didn't talk about this. We should have, because if evangelical Christians should not be part of the NCAA tournament, should evangelical Christians not be allowed to manage your bank, teach in your school, be a lawyer in our courts? I mean, of course, again, being a little facetious, but Kelly, this gets us back to this whole issue of intolerance. And you've been warning about this for some time. And when it breaks out for March Madness, when all the rest of us want to watch some just great basketball, and it has been pretty interesting to watch, who, again, predicted Loyola doing so well? Anyway, that's another whole story.
Well, the nun was praying.
Yeah,
I guess we
there
have
we
to
go. She's praying.
That's what I thought. I mean, you may get a law saying Oral Roberts people cannot pray for their service.
Well, I wonder if Loyola Marymount's going to be thrown out now because of the nun praying up in the stands.
I know.
mean,
you were taking where I thought I'd go with that. Yeah.
But even University of North Texas actually did fairly well to start out.
Did.
They lost, but that surprised everyone.
Well, the thing about this is that when it comes to the government, I mean, that's what we always thought we had to worry about. The Constitution's there, and, at First Liberty, we're, winning these lawsuits all over the country. The danger of what's happening now is sort of the woke, corporations and groups like the NCAA is that they're not government. And so the Constitution doesn't restrain them. So when you have corporations becoming more powerful than our government, I mean, trillion-dollar corporations, these big tech groups and et cetera, then it's no less a loss of people's freedom if, they're the ones engaging in this type of conduct. Now, fortunately, with employment and things like this, religious discrimination is not allowed.
Right.
But still, the danger is that a lot of this oppression is now seeping into sort of corporate power instead of government power.
Sure. And again, I just want to say this is probably a one-off. I'm not sure everybody wants to get rid of Oral Roberts or Liberty University or even Baylor or whatever, Loyola, but it just is an illustration of something that's a bigger issue that we'll talk about. Let me, as we're going to a break, just mention that we are part of Truth Team, and one of the reasons we have come to you this week is to encourage your financial support, and we actually still have a little bit left over on one of the matches for this hour. There was a donor who said, we're going to, matter of fact, launch some very significant match next hour, but we wanted to actually encourage people this hour, listening in Dallas or listening on the USA Network, online or whatever, to give to this ministry. And if you waited to the last day, well, it is the last day. So if you have not had a chance to join with us, that number is 800-347-5151. The website is pointofview.net, and if you can help us out, there is a match on the table. Every dollar doubled, and we'll come back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Christians and churches are facing significant challenges in America. That is why Dr. Erwin Lutzer wrote his book, We Will Not Be Silenced. It is not only a call to action, but a practical manual on how to address the many challenges we face in a society that is growing more secular every day. He takes some time to explain how we got to our current circumstances. Various forces are working to dismantle the core values that made this country great. History classes and civics classes are rewriting the past so as to delegitimize our Christian values. Focusing on diversity is used to divide and destroy us. We live in a world where free speech is under assault, but he explains that it really should be described as freedom of speech for me, but not for thee. And much of what is allowed as free speech should really be called propaganda. Dr. Lutzer also spends some time explaining how school curricula and popular culture are sexualizing the next generation of children. It is spreading sexual confusion and giving children a warped idea of their identity. He also talks about how socialism is initially attractive to the younger generation, but he also makes the case for capitalism that creates wealth that actually furthers Christian work everywhere. And he reminds us of the threat of those associated with radical Islam who desire to destroy Christianity and capitalism. He concludes by calling for Christians to be bold. Jesus, speaking to the New Testament church, gives a warning to them and to us. We need to wake up and strengthen what remains. Dr. Lutzer helps us know how to live out our convictions against a growing tide of hostility. We should show compassion and gentleness to those outside of the faith without affirming their non-Christian beliefs. And we should boldly preach the gospel and live out our Christian faith. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you hear on Viewpoints by visiting pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. How can we stay committed to truth if we don't even know what the truth is? You are listening to Point of View, where we help you discern truth and live it out.
Just a reminder, of course, that this is the end of Truth Team Week, so if you've been waiting to the last day, this is the last day. Privileged to have in studio with us Dr. Merrill Matthews and Kelly Shackelford. At the top of the hour, next hour, we will get into the fact that there will be, I know, a match coming, and I'll find out what that amount is, but we have a small one that's on right now, so if you would like to join with us, that number is 800-347-5151. Of course, you can also go to the website, pointofview.net. We talked a little bit about this with Dr. Merrill Matthews last week, but I haven't heard Kelly's comments about that. That is, we have eventually 3,000 15 to 17-year-olds right down the road from us here at the Dallas Convention Center. We now have some pictures. We've posted that on the Point of View Facebook page. These are pictures that came from Representative Henry Cuellar, a Democrat, interestingly enough, about what it looks like down there in Midland and a few other places. But there is no evidence that this is going to taper off anytime soon. So, Kelly, I'm going to come to you first because we haven't heard your comments about what's going on.
Well, it's ridiculous. I mean, I think with any complicated problem, think of it in our own lives. When we finally get a solution, it's just so inane to blow it up and try to start all over again. And clearly we have a border issue. Trump,
just don't call it a crisis.
That's right.
There's the first point.
Trump, really, that was one of his big issues, was to try to get up the border wall and all this. He obviously had some issues getting it fixed. I mean, it was very complicated with the courts and everything else, but he actually had it to where we had our border somewhat under control. And, as a result, people weren't coming here and putting their lives in danger, and these children weren't in danger. And then for the new administration to come in and blow everything up and create, really, crisis is not even strong enough. The fact of how many people are being abused because of this, how many children are being abused, this is really inexcusable. This is politics over people. And then to deny it, like Biden did yesterday, it's reprehensible conduct. It really is. There's no excuse for it, because it wasn't like they're trying to figure out how to solve this. We actually had it solved. I mean, the idea of stopping people in Mexico, and if they have, an asylum, to stop them there and let them seek a proper, adjudication of that. That was an excellent way to work. And the only reason that happened is because our president worked out a deal with the president of Mexico, and now all of that's blown up. And we've got people coming from everywhere that want to come into the United States because our president is more interested in politics than he is in what he's causing to people's lives, including all these children.
And, I would say humans, if people don't hear anything else, understand this. Humans respond to incentives.
Yes.
That's what happens. Joe Biden and his administration essentially said, the door is open. Come on in. We want to take care of you, which is why they had shirts. You had migrants coming up with Biden let us in.
One guy said, I've seen more Biden shirts than I saw at the Democratic National Convention.
And it's amazing. And now it was reported this week that the Biden administration is trying to pressure Mexico to stop these people from coming across Mexico. So what's happened? Joe Biden has essentially said, waved a green flag, time to come in. We're going to open the doors. And now we're complaining that Mexico isn't stopping them from coming. Whereas at least Trump tried to stop them from coming. And in the press conference yesterday, we're going to see more children coming, I think, because as the press the media were kindly talking to him and asking him very gentle questions about this, he said, we've deported a lot of people, but for these kids, I'm going to I'm not going to take out kids out. The kids are going to get to come in and we're going to have a place for them. If that's the case, you can expect a lot of people south of the border to send their kids across and then hope that the kids get in, and then they'll say, well, we haven't got anybody here. I'm 12 years old. I don't have a relative here. Well, then we need to bring your parents in, and they'll need to bring in the chain migration. This is just obvious what's happening. And I think Biden said they're setting up 15,000. I mean, they're creating places for 15,000 people, shipping them all over the United States. It's just amazing, and they don't seem to see the contradiction.
Well, and I mean, the hypocrisy of what's going on is just unbelievable. I can't even remember how many people were posting things about how Trump was putting kids in cages.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
And then they showed pictures of the Obama cages,
right?
And Biden is now doing it's much worse, much worse.
They call them soft cages because they have plastic up instead of bars, but they're still sleeping on the floor with a foil blanket kind of thing.
And it's so bad that they will not let the media in there.
That's right.
I mean, I cannot believe they're not letting the media in there. The media should be going crazy right now.
Should be.
And it just shows the irresponsibility of what's happening. I mean, it shows that the media doesn't really care either. They don't care about what's happening to children. They don't, even if they're, pro-Biden or whatever, they still need to do their job. And if they cared about the kids, not only the kids who are in these places, but the ones that are now going to be human trafficked to the United States because of this, they would bring attention to this. They would insist. They'd be out there banging on that door saying, you let us in. And, but, as Merrill was saying, it's kid gloves on the president, no matter what he does. Right
and what was amazing about the press conference, as they pressed a little bit about when you're going to see, Mr. President, you like transparency. And he said, we're for transparency. And as soon as we get this thing straightened out down there, we're going to be all for transparency. As soon as we get it whitewashed so it doesn't look so bad, we're going to let you in. I'm stunned by this stuff.
I am too. And let's get one other point out, because we are in the midst of Truth Team talking about why sometimes sometimes it's helpful to listen to point of view. The other day, not only did you expect that Alejandro Mayorkas say it's not a crisis, but he also said things like, well, I saw some of these orphan kids and I wasn't going to send them back through the desert. Well, they never did that under Trump. They actually put them on a government charter. And as a matter of fact, I looked it up. Mexico itself would not take anybody that was put back into the desert anyway. So it's just fallacious. But then back to the media. Washington Post the other day trying to defend Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas said that really this is not a surge. It's really not a crisis. It's just a seasonal aberration. And I looked it up. In this March, we are already at 17,000 unaccompanied minors that have crossed the border. It's only the 26th of March. It'll probably be about 20,000, but 17,000 is more than any amount that have crossed the border, unaccompanied ones. And yet we're supposed to read the Washington Post and say it's just a seasonal thing.
The Associated Press did a fact check on Biden's statement yesterday and said, well, no, in fact, it actually is a surge. It's not. It is a little seasonal in the sense that it tends to go up at this time of year.
Of course.
But it's much larger than it has been in the past. It is a surge.
Well, that was, that along with the fact that evidently, we just learned from President Biden, maybe President Biden learned it from himself yesterday, that children were being starved, too. That they were being starved. That was totally new. So, I mean, they were just making things up. But the reality is there. And to me, one of the clearest, everybody knows what's happening. You had a guy who ran, and for political reasons, he said these things, basically open the border, everybody come. And now there's a crisis, which everybody, should have expected was going to happen. The thing that I think is that is even more shocking is the idea that we have these detention centers, essentially, and the press isn't allowed in.
I know.
I mean, this is unheard of.
The only pictures we got are the ones we put on Facebook. I think we have them on our website, too, and those come from Representative Henry Cuellar. Those are the ones we have. As far
and the
as
Border Patrol is not allowed to talk to the press.
Oh, I know.
So I mean, it's like we're in a communist country.
I know.
Controlling the information that people get to see.
Live not by lies, right? Yep. Well, we're going to take a break, and all the reason to, again, consider what you might do to support this ministry, because if you're dependent on the Washington Post to give you a fact check, well, that one didn't work out. I guess Associated Press finally decided
AP
to.
did something.
As we do. And, I'm going to give some, 2 cheers up here for NPR a little bit later when we cover some of that in the next hour. So a few people are telling the story, but not many. And so if you want to get some facts and some of the numbers and some of the articles we're talking about, they're all at our website, pointofview.net. As you go there, you're going to find all sorts of great resources that we've posted today. At the top of the hour, we're going to talk about the filibuster. Maybe we'll talk about that just before we take a break here in the next segment. And then we'll get into the press conference and some of the votes on elections in Georgia and variety of other issues, some religious liberty issues. We've just got a lot to cover, but this would be a perfect time to give us a call, 800-347-5151. Of course, the website is pointofview.net. Be right back.
I recently threw away a coupon for a free cup of some really nice coffee. Why did I do that? Because when I looked at it, it expired a day earlier. Have you ever done that? Sometimes we miss great opportunities by waiting just a bit too long. Don't let that happen right now when it comes to our work together through Point of View. Kerby is sincerely optimistic. People are getting tired of the false narratives they get every day from the mainstream media. We believe Americans are ready and willing to do what it takes to create a brighter future, but it takes action. It takes being committed to truth, and it takes joining together as a team. Today is that moment. We need you to join us to be part of the team. And the opportunity right now is twice as good because we have a friend who will match double whatever you give. But you've got to act right now and go to pointofview.net/team or make the call 1-800-347-5151. Seize this opportunity today. Pointofview.net/team and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Once again, as you will find all sorts of different articles we've posted here today. We're going to get to many of those. The first press conference for Joe Biden, the filibuster, some of the various things happening in state legislatures, in particular Georgia, but even here in Texas, a number of things that have passed. But I thought for just a minute, while we have Dr. Merrill Matthews here, we have been talking about the vaccines, and I've mentioned a few times about how some of this is spun out of control in Europe, because first, you started having reports that people that got the AstraZeneca vaccine were getting blood clots and a number of other things. And the European Union was saying, no, that's not any higher than normal. You also have a different philosophy at the UK of saying, maybe we get everybody the first dose, then we'll come back to the second one. So there's some things we've learned by looking overseas on what works and what doesn't work, haven't we?
And I'll tell you something that doesn't work. The report came out earlier this week that one of the reasons why the European Union is so far behind every other country, it's been a disaster, is because they said we're going to hold off till we get a negotiated price that's a whole lot less.
I saw that, yes.
Than others. So they were holding off for that, and that ended up delaying their agreement. And now the European Union is going through third waves in various parts of it, and it has become a real political issue because the government, which in most of the countries in the European Union basically controls the healthcare system or largely controls it, and they wanted to get a cheaper price. And unlike the U.S., we know what they're giving some of the companies to buy the vaccines. We don't always know if it's a cheaper price or not, but the companies are doing well, and Americans have just really done very, very well in numbers of getting the people vaccinated.
It certainly is the case. And but again, that's one of those things where the European Union, some people said, would be better if they just let the individual states, countries, I should say, take it rather than those various member countries of the European Union.
And they decided to do it as a lock, whereas England went its own route because it's largely pulled out now, and so they've done much better than most of the other European Union. So they're still facing issues there in England, but they're doing better.
500 million vaccinations have been given so far worldwide. But again, the goal let's give Joe Biden at least some credit here. I wanted to get 100 million people vaccinated in the first 100 days. Now he's saying, well, maybe we should double down and make it 200 million.
I will give Joe Biden some credit as long as we give Donald Trump as much or more credit on that. Joe Biden came into office saying, I want to get 100 million. I want to get 1 million people vaccinated today. They'd already reached that goal when he came in office. It's another one of his little slips there.
Yes.
But they also have done a fairly good job so far. And I think the biggest issue has been the companies ramping up production. That took a little while. And number two, the states trying to figure out how we're going to do this in terms of getting the vaccines out so that people who want it can get it. And different states have taken different approaches. West Virginia took one approach, going to pharmacies, but it's a small state and it could do that. Dallas took a different approach where they were trying to do it down at the state fair. The county judge was handling this. It was a disaster. But then they decided to let some of the hospitals and others do it. I went to a hospital here, and it worked very, very well. And then in Denton, they ran this through the Motor Speedway out there, and that is people come back. I've not heard one person complain about that. Stay in their car, just drive through, get shot, and they're gone.
Do they get to do a lap too?
I've done laps around that. So it's you've had a sort of trial and error. We didn't know how to do this. We've learned over time, and so it's really ramped up and gotten much more efficient. But that was because that was a learning curve, not, I think, mostly because of Joe Biden's influence.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been interesting is one of the issues that I know Point of View listeners are concerned about, others are concerned about, is sort of mandatory things. Are the mandatory things coming? And
right. That was the next one.
We actually did a First Liberty Live on that and had one of our attorneys, she was actually the head lawyer at HHS on all the religious liberty and conscience issues, talk about what the law said and et cetera. But one of the things I think that has has been interesting to see them say, which people have learned, because I think a lot of people are concerned. Oh, is it coming? Are they going to mandate? Are they going to mandate this, that? All the experts are well aware that mandating is really a bad way to do it because it doesn't work. If you mandate, you actually end up creating more problems. So when you let people make their own decision, people tend to do things a lot more than if you try to control them. And then they're very suspicious. And so I thought that was good and maybe a hopeful sign that we won't have to fight a bunch of mandates that try to force people to violate their faith or a particular belief or whatever with regard to their children or something else. So that's been fascinating to watch because I think everybody expected that by now we would have a bunch of mandates.
Right.
In fact, it's the opposite. If you get one of these vaccines right now, you have to be told, it's in the paperwork, whatever, that you do not have to take the vaccine, that it's a choice you are making. So it's actually even the opposite right now. And no states are requiring any of this. So a lot of what people feared hasn't happened, at least yet, although there were some who would want it. But I think the reason for that is not a great reason. I think it's that they think that's not a good way to go. They've tried that in the past. It hasn't turned out too well.
I had a piece in The Hill, May of last year, which asked the question, could the government mandate people have vaccinations?
I remember that. Mm-hmm.
And the Supreme Court had ruled earlier, several years ago, decades ago, that states can for children going into public school and so forth, so that a state can do it with children who are entering public school. But generally speaking, the states haven't had that power, especially for adults. And I argued, I think we will be able to reach herd immunity before that, and so that those people who don't, I said in there, I'll when they open it up, I'll be the first in line. But not everybody wants to do that, and I think that's fine. But I also raised the question in there: could businesses end up doing that?
That is an issue,
and that's the issue.
Or airlines.
I said I said at the time, I think you'll find some businesses that may be subject to liability. If somebody says, I got COVID at your place, might do that. But it turns out the lawsuits, as I understand, really have not been out there. And businesses are becoming, I have heard a few companies saying we're going to require it. But for the most part, I haven't heard many companies saying that.
Yeah, I would encourage people, if they haven't seen it, go to just spell out firstlibertylive.com, and you could see the one. We did the one this week on the Equality Act, but last week was on
the religious exemption for vaccines, and we did promote that last week.
And there is she talked about employment, and there is a federal law that protects religious discrimination and requires religious accommodation in the workplace. So that would be a protection for people who had a religious objection, but that's overridden if it would cause an undue hardship or harm to the business. So if you've got, let's say it's a medical facility that's interacting with people, you could see that in those places, your religious liberty exemption will probably be overridden. But in many other places where it's irrelevant, it would not be.
Yeah, the good news is it's just worked out much better than we thought it might.
Right.
Initially.
And let me mention that again because a lot of people go to firstliberty.org and can't find it because it's firstlibertylive.com.
Right.
And it was about a week ago that you talked about that. One other one, Lathan Watts was on with us last week. I love this one. Don't Get Fooled Again by Religious Freedom. Sounds like a song. I think it is, as a matter of fact. And so maybe after the break we could talk about that because we are starting to see in the state of Texas, for example, and some others saying, you know what? Churches should be essential resources and essential services and those kinds of things. And we saw how in many cases, under the guise of public health, and both of you are going to be able to weigh in on that, and under the guise of flattening the curve, that in some respects we found ourselves losing our liberties, right? So
15 days to flatten the curve, only 15 days, right?
Didn't seem to do that. So again, Pete Townsend says, don't get fooled again.
It flattened my checkbook.
Yeah. And that'll be the case. So we'll come back and talk about that because you've had a couple of those very significant actions, not only in the state of Texas, where so many of you are listening right now, now, but also other places as well. And it's a very important issue of religious liberty that we'll talk about. Speaking of that, also might mention something that isn't necessarily a case of First Liberty, but it was interesting, in which an appeals court ruled in favor of a University of Iowa student and student group. And we've talked in the past about some of these other cases that have come down. Religious liberty cases keep winning again and again and again. But you know what? You might not know that if you didn't listen to Point of View. So that's one of the reasons why we're covering those kinds of topics every day. And as we go to a break, one more time for you to consider going to the website, pointofview.net. As you go there, hoping maybe some of you might want to join at $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year, especially since we have a match on the table. You not only receive the Outlook magazine, but these booklets that we've been talking about as well. And at higher levels, at $50 a month, we have a great series of gifts we like to make available to you, and even some at $100 a month. But whatever you can do, we would greatly appreciate it. 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
Studies are surfacing that show us how effective the shutdowns implemented in response to COVID-19 really were in saving lives. Were the results worth the dramatic drop in private sector employment, the lost businesses, the foregone dreams? Are states with stricter lockdowns more effective in preventing deaths from COVID-19? Chuck DeVore of the Texas Public Policy Foundation points out that this economic pain should have been rewarded with a lower COVID fatality rate. That's what we were told as we obediently stayed home. Initial indications are that it wasn't worth it. Using COVID fatality data supplied by the New York Times, along with private employment data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Mr. DeVore found, quote, no benefit earned by states that inflicted the largest destruction on their job base. With not much difference in virus fatality outcomes, private sector job loss was 11.9% in New York, 8.3% in California. The decline was just 3.7% in Texas and 5.1% in Florida. And what about mask mandates? A recent report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention states that 73.6% of counties had state-issued mask mandates from March through December 2020. These mandates accounted for less than a 2% decrease in COVID-19 cases and COVID-19 deaths, 100 days out from implementation. Any drop in cases and deaths is wonderful news. But now, with the vaccine rollout, CDC's updated advice is that adults who have been vaccinated continue wearing masks, social distancing, and avoiding non-essential travel. It feels like the goalposts are being moved. But CDC calls this a first step towards normalcy. It's not normal to ratchet down the freedom of Americans when doing so doesn't help that much. As states begin to remove pandemic-related restrictions, public health officials are warning of a final surge in the virus. A year in, free Americans can deal with it. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View, where we discuss the issues you won't hear about anywhere else, because we are committed to truth, and God's truth applies to all areas of life.
Back once again, and we will simply take a few minutes to get into this issue of religious liberty. And I thought there'd be a couple ways to cover that. Dr. Merrill Matthews, Kelly Shackelford. First of all, your First Liberty Live is the whole issue of the Equality Act. And just a minute ago, we were also talking about whether or not we should ever let the lockdowns constrain our liberty. So what about some of the things you've been talking about there at First Liberty Live?
We try to cover the issues that are going on and how they connect to religious freedom. And so the Equality Act is a big one, obviously, because, basically, for those who don't know, the Equality Act goes in and rips out religious freedom protection from the Religious Freedoms Restoration Act. And actually, Newt Gingrich had a good statement. I was in a meeting with him not too long ago, and he said, they really need to rename the Equality Act. He said, what it really is the LGBT Supremacy Act.
Oh.
And I thought that is a good summary, because that's exactly what it does. It says in every area of life, LGBT trumps religious freedom. Mm-hmm. And, of course, that's not exactly how our country was formed. Yes, you have freedom of conscience and freedom of religion as long as whatever issue we picked is not involved. And then it overrides all your religious freedom and all your freedom of conscience. But that's a really important battle that's going on right now in the U.S. Senate. Of course, a lot of these battles, whether it's the Equality Act, whether it's H.R. 1, whether it's court packing, which would destroy our courts, or these things are so extreme that there literally are no votes on the Republican side. So the only way to get these things through the Senate is if they destroyed the filibuster. And that's why you see a lot of the talk about the filibuster going on. So that's, just be aware that these are really important battles. They're important because they're so extreme that they would have huge consequences for our country. But it really is all resolving around the filibuster and whether they will, after 150 years, decide that, we need to be a little more extreme now. And so we don't need bipartisanship on legislation through the Senate.
On the Equality Act, for just a minute, a lot of people say, well, this is not good in terms of our rights. But one of the points that was made during First Liberty Live was this act would ultimately threaten the livelihoods of millions of Americans. Now, Kelly, I think some people say, well, okay, if I'm a baker or a florist, I can see that. But it's a lot broader than that, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your profession is. Think of it if you anybody who right now who works in a Fortune 500 company, right? Do you think that they won't say, well, if you don't have the right beliefs, then we're going to take you out? How many of those have diversity statements that you have to agree with, and training seminars to make sure you get in line with the right beliefs? And if you don't have a right to your own beliefs, and if you always lose whenever there's any sort of sexual issue, that you have a biblical belief that's differently, it doesn't matter what your job is. You can be wiped out. Your livelihood completely.
Yeah. And it's always raised a question to me, because we had like the Masterpiece Bakery case, and in that case, you had was it gay couple that wanted to wanted him to bake a cake along those lines. And so he said, no, I'm not going to do that. But I work at a think tank. We produce papers based upon ideological beliefs. Mm-hmm. Now, they're not religious beliefs. Those are not part of what we do. We do economic stuff. But suppose somebody comes in and says, I would like you to write a paper that supports LGBT rights or communism or the Obamacare health care plan. And we said, well, no, we don't believe that. That's not something we believe in. Could you be forced to write something? Because there's a free speech aspect in the Masterpiece Bakery. There's a free speech aspect here. Could we be forced by the government to write something defending LGBT rights or something else? I don't know. We're not there yet. But if you open the door and you make that a possibility, if a baker or a florist or others have to comport to that and provide what somebody says on demand, because, from our standpoint, anybody's free to go to IPI.org, take any of our product, share it, read it, quote from it, whatever they want to do. Like the Masterpiece Bakery, any customer that comes in, they can buy something. They just can't tell him what to do. And so I at least raise that question. Would that be a something that could come from that?
Yeah, the best example I give people to try to understand why this whole mindset is not only unconstitutional, it's just wrong, is does anybody really think that it would be okay for the government to be able to punish a black baker because he won't make a cake for a Klan rally? I mean, I think everybody knows he should not have to produce messaging or cakes to celebrate things that he or she disagrees with. I mean, that's quintessential America, you know? And the idea that the government can come in and punish you because you don't toe their line or whatever they think is something good is a major problem. And this is a victory we have to win, or we really don't have freedom. And again, what's sad is these bills, these really extreme bills are trying to push through that would strip a lot of these things away. And it's why we have a filibuster, which tries to give minority voice. It requires some level of bipartisanship, and today we're just so divided that that we want to get rid of that, which would be a huge change for our country, and I don't think a very good one.
Let me, if I can, just before we take a break, mention that we talked about Masterpiece Cake, and Jack Phillips goes all the way to Supreme Court. You think that's over.
It's coming back, isn't it?
Yeah, and now they're over transgender issues.
Right.
So this man has, since he founded the cake company back in 1993, has probably spent more hours in litigation sometimes than he has actual time baking a cake. So he's worth our prayer, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And when we come back from the break at the top of the hour, Dr. Merrill Matthews has got a very good piece here that is available through IPI.org, Fixing the Filibuster the Jimmy Stewart Way. And it's amazing how many times the word filibusters come up even this week when we've been talking with different individuals, because guess what? There is a real possibility that could be changed. So if you don't mind, you did a little of this last week, but people sometimes forget. Give us a little history of where the idea of the filibuster, cloture, and all the rest, and what could actually take place. And if indeed we do the filibuster Jimmy Stewart way, which is kind of the idea that President Joe Biden was suggesting, what would that really look like? And so we'll get into some of those issues, and I think you will appreciate that. We also have some other material. We'll give you an update on what's happened in terms of an election overhaul in Georgia, which was signed by the governor. And so we'll get into that. We'll get into a couple of religious liberty issues. And one other one I've posted, Kelly pointed that out. Parler alerted the FBI about potential violence. You know, that one that they had to shut down because it's so violent. And actually, they were doing their due diligence, and they weren't getting credit for that as well. Just a couple of those. But again, if you want to go to IPI.org, you can find the material by Dr. Merrill Matthews. Go to firstliberty.org. But again, don't forget, it's also firstlibertylive.com. Right? I think I got them all right. And before the next couple hours is over, we'll go into and talk about everything that's available on those websites. But as we come down to the end of this first hour, I hope you'll join with us. And as we go to a break, that's a perfect time to give a call. 800-347-5151. We've got a number of probe staff, point of view staff, I should say, willing to answer the phones. Matter of fact, my wife will be answering the phone. So again, you can go and make that phone call, 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net. We do need to hear from you, and we'll be back right after this.
I recently threw away a coupon for a free cup of some really nice coffee. Why did I do that? Because when I looked at it, it expired a day earlier. Have you ever done that? Sometimes we miss great opportunities by waiting just a bit too long. Don't let that happen right now when it comes to our work together through Point of View. Kerby is sincerely optimistic. People are getting tired of the false narratives they get every day from the mainstream media. We believe Americans are ready and willing to do what it takes to create a brighter future, but it takes action. It takes being committed to truth, and it takes joining together as a team. Today is that moment. We need you to join us to be part of the team. And the opportunity right now is twice as good because we have a friend who will match double whatever you give. But you've got to act right now and go to pointofview.net/team or make the call 1-800-347-5151. Seize this opportunity today. pointofview.net/team and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Friday weekend edition, and we are so grateful that you could join with us today, as we're going to be talking about all sorts of different topics. We'll get into the whole issue of the filibuster, which has actually been a topic we've been addressing much this week, and this piece by Dr. Merrill Matthews, Fixing the Filibuster the Jimmy Stewart Way, is one of the topics. We also have seen that there is a very significant election overhaul taking place in Georgia, so we'll certainly talk about that. Another religious liberty victory having to do with a Christian student group, and a lot more. So in studio with me, of course, Kelly Shackelford, President, CEO, Chief Counsel for First Liberty Institute, and Dr. Merrill Matthews, who's resident scholar for the Institute for Policy Innovation. Dr. Matthews, let me start with you, because this piece, Fixing the Filibuster the Jimmy Stewart Way, is a really important topic. One, because there are a lot of people talking about getting rid of it.
Yes.
So give us a little of the history, if you can.
Yes, it's come up as a national issue now because Democrats want to push through some legislation which they won't get any Republican support for, and if they don't end the filibuster, they aren't sure that they can get it done. So the filibuster is not part of the Constitution, never was part of the Constitution, but what happened is after they adopted the Constitution, both the House and Senate adopted some rules for them to be able to operate under. They had what was called a previous question element in there, and that's where if somebody's droning on, Senator Blowhard keeps talking and talking, they have the ability to be able to call the question, take a vote on it, and they can stop debate on that. So that went on for a little while, but Aaron Burr, as Vice President of the United States and President of the Senate, decided that that should not be part of the Senate, and he convinced the senators to eliminate that. So they didn't. They ended that ability to be able to end debate. That went on to the 1830s, and not really much happened. They started the first, what you might call a filibuster, in the 1830s, but they were still fairly rare. They picked up in the 1880s, started doing a little more. But it came to a head in 1917 when we were close to entering the war. President Woodrow Wilson wanted to be able to arm merchant ships that might be fired on by Germans. Republicans were filibustering that. And so he tried to press to get that changed. They did under what was called Rule 22. If 2/3 of the members present decided to end debate on something, they could do it. Now, that was a small number because if you only had 9 senators present there, then 6 of them could vote to end it. You didn't have to have the whole body. But that went on until 1975 when they made some changes to it. They did a couple of changes to Rule 22. They said we're changing the vote to end the debate from 2/3 to 3/5 of all the members, and that meant you had to have 60 votes to be able to end debate. But they said we want to be able to allow the filibuster to go on and not just clog up the whole works. So we're going to create, in essence, a 2-track system. So you can have a filibuster going on, but the Senate can still go on and carry on its business. So in essence, what it meant was that a senator could call or notify the majority leader and say, I intend to filibuster something. And so they'd say, okay, we'll put this aside and we'll go ahead and continue with our business. It was meant to be something that allowed the Senate to continue their business. What happened was that as they looked at this, they said, it's called oftentimes a virtual filibuster, but it meant they didn't have to stand up and debate this for hours at a time. As those of us who are familiar with Mr. Smith goes to Washington's, where Jimmy Stewart stands up for hours on end. Doesn't mean you can't, but they didn't have to do that. And so as a result, filibuster started just exploding as more and more senators use this as a way to essentially block legislation. And that's kind of where we are. We went from a relatively handful of senators per two-year congressional session to where we have an awful lot of them now. And it is a way to block legislation. And that's why they want to try to, the Democrats want to say, let's get rid of it, even though many Democrats have supported this in the past, voted for it in the past. They, in fact, had a letter back in the 2017 in which they said we need to, we want to retain the filibuster. 61 senators signed that letter. 31 or 2 of them were Democrats or independents who agreed with that. Almost all of them are still there. Kamala Harris and Cory Booker were signers of that letter wanting to keep the full filibuster.
Let me just mention that this article that you have put together, I've got it in PDF form, 5 pages and some great material. I'm going to come back and talk about its significance. But first of all, we also have in studio with us today Brad Fisk. And one of the things that we've been doing, Brad, this week is, of course, we've been in the midst of Truth Team. We've come to the last day, and the theme all week has been Committed to Truth.
It has. We do this a couple times a year. We simply come to you and remind a lot of you who tell us you're surprised that we are listener-supported Christian radio. And we're no different than a lot of the ministries you hear on the air. And we're coming to you like we do a couple times a year and say, could you help us stand financially so we can continue to do the mission that God has called us to? So you can participate by giving us a call with your best gift at 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151.
Kelly, let me get your comments, because if we get rid of the filibuster, there's a lot of bad pieces of legislation that have passed the House that are in the Senate right now.
Yeah, in addition to H.R. 1 and the Equality Act, which would be disasters, I mean, they're very extreme. The one that at First Liberty we've really felt the Lord leading us to fight is against court packing. Court packing, if those don't know what it is, it is essentially an attempt to add justices to the Supreme Court so that you can get the political results you wish to get. And if you do that, you destroy the Supreme Court. You destroy our court system. Venezuela did this 5 years ago, and they have tyranny now, and Maduro is controlling things. This was attempted back in 1936 and 37 in the United States. And again, Democrat senators stood up and said this would be tyranny. And yet all they need, if they get rid of the filibuster, is a majority vote, and they're fully intending to do this. So the filibuster is very important on a number of different levels of things that if they were allowed to go through, I don't think our country would ever be the same, and it might not be able to survive. So the filibuster is really more important than we've ever seen right now. And so it's something that people really need to pay attention to. We're trying to educate people on these things at First Liberty, but I think most people have no idea. There's been some polling on this, and it shows that they don't know what's happening right now.
I might just send you to firstlibertylive.com and also ipi.org, but we have all those links on our website at pointofview.net. And Brad, what I thought I'd do is bring in Warren Kelly after the break, because he's the president of Point of View. Give us a little bit of an idea what's been going on this week, and we are coming to the last day. And I know that some of our listeners wait to the last day to give to this ministry. For as little as $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year, you can actually be part of the Truth Team. And so you could join at that level, or the $50 a month level, or the $100 a month level. And those are resources that we want to put in your hands, and we'll talk about that as well. But as we go to a break, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or pointofview.net.
That's pointofview.net at 800-347-5151. We have some really cool gifts, especially the $50 level. So go to the website, because all the information is there at pointofview.net. But you know what? A gift of any amount, single or monthly, will really be strategic. Thank you, thank you, thank you for calling.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Christians and churches are facing significant challenges in America. That is why Dr. Erwin Lutzer wrote his book, We Will Not Be Silenced. It is not only a call to action, but a practical manual on how to address the many challenges we face in a society that is growing more secular every day. He takes some time to explain how we got to our current circumstances. Various forces are working to dismantle the core values that made this country great. History classes and civics classes are rewriting the past so as to delegitimize our Christian values. Focusing on diversity is used to divide and destroy us. We live in a world where free speech is under assault, but he explains that it really should be described as freedom of speech for me, but not for thee. And much of what is allowed as free speech should really be called propaganda. Dr. Lutzer also spends some time explaining how school curricula and popular culture are sexualizing the next generation of children. It is spreading sexual confusion and giving children a warped idea of their identity. He also talks about how socialism is initially attractive to the younger generation, but he also makes the case for capitalism that creates wealth that actually furthers Christian work everywhere. And he reminds us of the threat of those associated with radical Islam who desire to destroy Christianity and capitalism. He concludes by calling for Christians to be bold. Jesus, speaking to the New Testament church, gives a warning to them and to us. We need to wake up and strengthen what remains. Dr. Lutzer helps us know how to live out our convictions against a growing tide of hostility. We should show compassion and gentleness to those outside of the faith without affirming their non-Christian beliefs. And we should boldly preach the gospel and live out our Christian faith. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you hear on Viewpoints by visiting pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. How can we stay committed to truth if we don't even know what the truth is? You are listening to Point of View, where we help you discern truth and live it out.
You know, when I think about the importance of Point of View Radio, it is so essential that we connect with the Christian conservative community on the issues and the topics of the day so that they can really get that information to educate and inform them to make better decisions. And if we don't stand up as evangelical Christians, as Christian conservatives, and start to show the other points of view and start to talk about these issues that are critical out there for the building of character, the strengthening of the soul and the spirit against some of the very negative impacts of culture, then we will lose our young people. We will lose future generations. The important thing about Point of View ministry is that it arms you. It equips you to go out and do exactly as God commanded Joshua to do, to be strong and of good courage, for the Lord thy God shall never leave you nor forsake you.
Colonel Alan West, again, encouraging you to join with us today on our Truth Team Week, and the theme has, of course, been Committed to Truth. And I thought we would bring into the studio for just a minute the president of Point of View, Warren Kelly, and you've been watching all the action, and you've been taking a lot of phone calls. We were trying to get you in here the other day, and you're on the phone taking phone calls.
I've been taking phone calls, too. We've had quite a few coming in, little spurts, and getting really busy where they needed some help. So let me say thank you to each and every one of you who have given. We so much appreciate that. I mean, Kerby said it many times. I've said it. Without you, we'd all just be sitting here in the studio talking to each other, and nobody would hear what we're saying. But because of you and your gifts, that's what makes it possible to have this program all across the nation. So thank you for those of you who have given. And for those of you who haven't, let me encourage you that there's still time. We very much rely on the Friday program to be our biggest day, and so we need to hear from you today.
So again, we're going to get into some of the topics, filibuster and all the rest. So you're encouraging people to call, and then you're going to run out of here and answer the phones
Go
as
answer
well.
the phones, yes. Well, let me just say real quick, I know that there are a number of our listeners that have been impacted by the pandemic in one way or the other, and I know that some of you are not in a position to give, and we understand that, and we don't want you to feel guilty in any way, shape, or form. Please do consider praying for us, but that just means that we need the others of you who are in a position to give. We need you that much more. So please pick up that phone and call us, or go to pointofview.net.
Well, thank you for coming in here, and we'll give it back to Brad here, because, Brad, I think you've got some announcements you want to give to us.
Yeah, I was running out the doors, you noticed, and running back. Guess what? We have a $14,000 match challenge on the table right now. But we have to get that taken care of by the end of the show. It's only there during that time. Don't delay. Here's the phone number, 800-347-5151. We want to say thanks to a friend in Ohio through WGGN Radio, giving $2,000 of that money to the match money. So that's really exciting, and thank you, friend, for that donation. But guys, here's the way it works. The money, the $14,000, is outside of our total right now. It's not part of what we've raised. It moves from the sitting out there to in our total when you match it. Every dollar you give releases another dollar from the match challenge. That's the way it works, Kerby. So here's the phone number. Here's the website. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. You can also give anytime at pointofview.net, pointofview.net. Every dollar doubled up to $14,000. Thank you, Lord.
Let me just mention again, you can join at the $1 a day, $360 a year. But if you join at the $50 a month level, they want me, maybe at the next break, I will be watching online. You'll see some of the bags that we're making available. Mm-hmm. But Kelly, let me come back to you, because we've been talking about the filibuster. I'm trying to figure out what this means. If indeed you court pack, if you change all these election rules, if you pass the Equality Act, if we pass amnesty, and we change all the rules about gun ownership, this is a very different America, isn't it?
It is. I mean, just take court packing alone, because people might not understand how this happens. But I just want you to think about this. If the president can just add justices to the Supreme Court, and by the way, there's nothing in the Constitution about how many justices. So that's why this is something that's kind of open. If the president can just add 4 or 5 justices to get to the conclusions they want, then guess what happens when the next president comes in? They add justices, right?
Yes.
And so at that point, no one has constitutional rights anymore. You only they're constitutional privileges. You only get rights that the president wants you to have, because he or she can appoint however many justices they need to decide which rights you do not have and which rights you have. And that's why it is a move to tyranny. And that's why in only 5 years in Venezuela, they went from one of the most incredible countries that we had to now just total tyranny with Maduro. So this is really important, and it's why you really need to be committed to prayer. By the way, who is the key on that? Manchin is one of the two. Senator Manchin from West Virginia and Senator Sinema have both spoken out and said that they do not want to remove the filibuster. But Manchin and Meet the Press started waffling on that. And guess what comes out in the press today?
Oh, boy, here we go.
The Biden administration has just hired Manchin's wife for a $160,000 a year plum job. So you can see what's going on here, and people really need to be active. If you're in West Virginia, you need to be calling. If you're in Arizona, you need to be calling. But this is really important. This affects a lot of issues and really the future of our country.
Dr. Merrill Matthews, again, I really encourage people to get a copy of this, which is available through IPI, but we have it on our website as well, because you show the original letter where people said we want to keep the filibuster. Right. But if indeed they do the filibuster the Jimmy Stewart way, what does that look like? Can you give us an idea?
Yeah, what we're proposing, and this is what a number, and as I hear Joe Biden and Manchin discuss discussing some possible changes. It seems like they're embracing this. It doesn't end the 60 vote cloture. It just means that as a senator, you can't call the majority leader and say, I'm going to filibuster this and then go on vacation in Hawaii. It means you have to stand up and filibuster for a while, you or your colleagues as well, if they want to do it. So you have to go to the Senate. You got to hold the floor. It brings a lot of attention to it. Rand Paul did something like this back in 2013. He did get a lot of attention for doing it. And if I remember right, he actually got Barack Obama at the time to make a small accommodation that he was asking for in something that Obama was wanting to do. So it doesn't end the filibuster. It just makes it a little more difficult for the person to filibuster, so that you can't. It doesn't stop it. It just means that you slow the process some.
Brad, I was just thinking right now, people listening saying, I knew a little bit about the filibuster. I just got an education about that.
Right.
I just realized how much more dangerous it is in terms of court packing. I just found out that all of a sudden now the Biden administration's hiring Joe Manchin's wife. I'm sure they're hearing all of this for the very first time here on Point of View.
I was just thinking the same thing, because, this is a perfect example of why Point of View even exists, is to bring this kind of issue to the table so that we know we got to do something about this. And so we want to continue to be that voice in the Christian community that calls us to action when that needs to happen. Here's the phone number for you to financially step up and be a partner with us. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. I think this issue alone is worth you joining with us financially. There are dozens and hundreds of others, but this is critical, Kerby, very critical. 800, just a minute, 800-347-5151. Let's fill every single lineup, please.
And I'm just going to say, after the break, we're going to move on, not because this isn't important, but there are some other issues that we wanted to cover as well. We'll talk about some of these election overhaul actions in Georgia in particular, but also what's happening in a lot of these state legislatures around the country. We'll talk about some religious liberty issues, and these are all, again, topics that we are addressing every single day here on Point of View. So take the time to visit the website, which is pointofview.net. I told you before, it won't take much time away from this. I went on Monday to do that. Took me all about 2 minutes. And if you call right now, we will probably fill up the lines. That's a good thing. And so if you get a busy signal, just wait and call right back again. But there is a great opportunity to fill those lines right now.
We need to have you call and remind you that there's a $14,000 dollar for dollar match on the table. My friend, you give $1 a day, it becomes $2 a day. You give a $500 bill, you get another $500 into the total. Every dollar you give releases another. So everything is doubled. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. And on the web?
At pointofview.net. And as we mentioned, you can go there not only to give, but if you want to know about some of the gifts that we love to send to you, that is there as well. I know you don't give to get, but we certainly wanted to do that. And as Warren Kelly said, if you can't help us out, pray for us. But most importantly, let's hear from some of you that can help us out. 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
I recently threw away a coupon for a free cup of some really nice coffee. Why did I do that? Because when I looked at it, it expired a day earlier. Have you ever done that? Sometimes we miss great opportunities by waiting just a bit too long. Don't let that happen right now when it comes to our work together through Point of View. Kerby is sincerely optimistic. People are getting tired of the false narratives they get every day from the mainstream media. We believe Americans are ready and willing to do what it takes to create a brighter future, but it takes action. It takes being committed to truth, and it takes joining together as a team. Today is that moment. We need you to join us to be part of the team. And the opportunity right now is twice as good because we have a friend who will match double whatever you give. But you've got to act right now and go to pointofview.net/team or make the call 1-800-347-5151. Seize this opportunity today. Pointofview.net/team and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Last day of Truth Team Week, and if you have not joined us, this is the time to do so. If you've been waiting, this is the last day, and we're coming down to some of the last hour or so. So again, we really need to hear from you. And Brad, we have a very significant match on the table.
$14,000 match on the table, and we'd love to get that cleared up by the top of the hour, and you can do that. Some can give $1,000 single gift. That becomes $2,000. Some could give $1,000 a month. Okay, that take clear up the whole thing pretty much. So no, a gift of any amount, a single gift of $25 will be added together, and we'll one call at a time, one gift at a time. We will get to this match because we really need to not leave any of this money on the table. And so please give us a call, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or pointofview.net.
I thought I would show for those of you online here, this is the very beautiful bag for the women. And again, it could be for the women, or I've noticed that occasionally a man says, I'll order it. Maybe he's going to give it to his wife. But anyway, That's one of the very nice
lots of pockets in there.
And again, that is at the $50 a month level.
Yes.
And we've had some people say, no, I don't need anything. But many have said, oh, sure, I'd like to have something that has point of view and carry it around. We have a canvas bag. I'll show that in the next segment. And so those are some topics. But again, that number is 800-347-5151. And one of our other articles that we've posted here today comes from our friends at NPR. Georgia governor signs election overhaul, including changes to absentee voting. Kelly Shackelford, a while back when people were saying, I'm really concerned about the election, you made a very strong point about the fact that maybe there's some things that can be done nationally, but a lot of it happens at the state legislature. And I've been looking at what's happening in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, even here in the state of Texas, where we're broadcasting from today, but also in Georgia. And this passed both the House and the Senate and was signed by the governor.
Yeah, and that's the way it's supposed to happen. The Constitution specifically gives power over the modes and manners of their elections to not the state, to the state legislature. They want it to be the representatives of the people of that state. This is the reason we have 50 separate states, and everybody knows how their state should be done. But the great thing about it is cleaning these things up. What's amazing to me is the nomenclature being used, even by President Biden yesterday. I mean, the idea that if you have people provide an ID to vote, that is voter suppression. Okay, one side says you're trying to make it harder for people to vote. Well, most Americans, I think it's around 85%, say, no, I have to have an ID to get a library book. Don't tell me there's something wrong with me having an ID to make sure that I've got somebody legally voting. I mean, Americans agree with these common sense things. But the language, the president yesterday said, these are worse than the Jim Crow laws. I mean, that is so ridiculous. These are things to make sure that people are legally allowed to vote. And the idea of sort of using language to try to confuse people and to say that to allow people to do things like provide an ID, like to not roam through the neighborhood collecting other people's ballots. That's called ballot harvesting. There's a lot of these things that everybody knows are bad things to do if you want to keep voter integrity. And people want to have confidence that their vote counts because it's not being watered down by other people. So what they just did in Georgia with incredible attacks, ridiculous attacks, is a really good thing. The governor, I haven't seen if the governor signed it yet. He's supposed to sign it very quickly. And I think we're going to see this happen in a number of the other states. And this is a good thing because people can have confidence to know that the elections are valid. When if you do the polling right now, it's not just Republicans. It's a good percentage of the Democrats don't have confidence in the voting. we really need that as a country.
I might just mention yesterday we did post something that talked about the fact that both Republicans, Democrats, Independents all believe that a voter ID is a good idea. African American and Hispanic American also agree. You always get a majority with that. And yet, Dr. Merrill Matthews, you would think that asking for a voter ID is just one of the most significant and damaging issues going all the way back to the Jim Crow laws.
And, I would encourage our listeners to, the things that were going on in Georgia and the law and so forth, they're being greatly criticized by the left and Stacey Abrams, but you oftentimes don't know where they were coming from because some of these things are fairly intricate. For instance, the law, as I understand it, allows for a drop-off box at a precinct. I think one per precinct, and I think they have to be at the polling places. That's so they can keep an eye on it.
Yes.
And my understanding is that there was criticism of that, but then prior to that, they didn't have any. I mean, they opened up some drop-off boxes for the pandemic, but prior to that, Georgia law, as I understand it, didn't have any of it. So allowing for a box is actually an expansion towards what the left wanted, not a retraction of that. The other thing I want to mention is, and I've heard the Secretary of State there in Georgia talk about this. When people say we want to expand it from early voting from a week or 2 weeks to 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks, they say, look, this you have to have people there manning these things for all the hours that they're open. And it becomes harder and harder the longer you do this. So I'm a big fan of allowing early voting. I always go early, but within a week or 2 weeks or something's fine with me. But some of the things that they're demanding just makes it a whole lot more problematic for the state to be able to do it effectively. So I've looked through some of the things in the Georgia law, but I just encourage our listeners to be a little careful on some of the things they're hearing because it may not be accurate.
And again, back to Kelly's point, I'm holding up a Constitution here, looking at Article 1, Section 4. The times and places and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in what? The state by the legislature thereof. What about some of the decisions being made by judges and election officials and county judges and governors? That doesn't seem to be the legislature. Am I missing something?
No, you're not. That's when they try to overrule the legislature, some judge, some government official, they have zero authority to do so. And again, I think if the courts have said this. I mean, they said this at the Supreme Court in the Bush v. Gore case. It's the state legislature that makes those decisions, and so it's good that in places like Georgia, and a number of other states. I mean, there are tons of legislation right now going through these state legislatures to try to make sure that some of the things that were being attempted last time aren't attempted again because it's laid out very clearly in the law.
We still have a lot of money left on the match. I just got a little note here.
Okay.
So we've made a progress, but it's a short amount. We have some real need for some phone calls right now.
We do. We have a match challenge on the table. We'd love to get that cleared up by the top of the hour, and we're just asking you, please stand with us financially. Won't you give us a call with your very best gift at 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. 5151. How about three of you at $1,000 each giving us a call to knock some of this match out? Thank you for calling.
We might get back in just a few minutes, talk about one of these religious liberty cases having to do with Christian student groups, and so we'll get into that. And, of course, that's something that Kelly Shackelford has been working on in so many different ways, so we'll certainly focus on some time and attention there. But also, we've just been mentioning the press conference. Do want to get some comments around the round table in just a minute about the press conference, so we'll get into that as well. But just before we take a break, Dr. Merrill Matthews, since we have a minute, you are probably as familiar with point of view as anybody around the table. You and I have been working together for decades. Hate to say how long, but why should people support point of view?
30 years now.
Yes,
going back to 1991.
Wow. I know.
That's a long time. And, anybody who knows me knows I'm cheap. I'm really cheap. I'm not interested in buying things unless I start getting a 50% or more discount.
There you go.
So once it hits 50% discount, then it gets my attention. So last December, I was looking. We had a matching grant then, dollar for dollar, and I said, That's a 50% discount. That is, if
Good, we qualify.
I get $1 worth of bang for 50 cents. So
Attaboy.
I jumped right in there and I said, I'm going to take advantage of that because now this cheap person is actually getting something for his money, a lot more than he'd normally get. So I was a contributor back in December, made a Christmas gift, and but that's because we had that dollar from dollar match. It was just a good time to make a deal.
Well, we'll still have a lot of that on the table. So
Yes.
what are we encouraging people to do?
To give us a call or go online. Pointofview.net is where you can make your gift, or you can call and talk to our wonderful phone volunteers. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Let's just blast the phones off. 8 of you going to the phones right now.
And again, if you are driving right now, you can certainly call in a few minutes, or you can just pull over if you've got your cell phone, and you can simply go to the website, pointofview.net. And matter of fact, even as you're listening to the conversation we're going to have in just a minute, you can be listening to that and still go online and make your pledge, and that is very easy to do. It's at pointofview.net, but as Brad said, let's get those phones ringing. 800-347-5151. We'll talk about a religious liberty victory right after this.
Studies are surfacing that show us how effective the shutdowns implemented in response to COVID-19 really were in saving lives. Were the results worth the dramatic drop in private sector employment, the lost businesses, the foregone dreams? Are states with stricter lockdowns more effective in preventing deaths from COVID-19? Chuck DeVore of the Texas Public Policy Foundation points out that this economic pain should have been rewarded with a lower COVID fatality rate. That's what we were told as we obediently stayed home. Initial indications are that it wasn't worth it. Using COVID fatality data supplied by the New York Times, along with private employment data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Mr. DeVore found, quote, no benefit earned by states that inflicted the largest destruction on their job base. With not much difference in virus fatality outcomes, private sector job loss was 11.9% in New York, 8.3% in California. The decline was just 3.7% in Texas and 5.1% in Florida. And what about mask mandates? A recent report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention states that 73.6% of counties had state-issued mask mandates from March through December 2020. These mandates accounted for less than a 2% decrease in COVID-19 cases and COVID-19 deaths, 100 days out from implementation. Any drop in cases and deaths is wonderful news. But now, with the vaccine rollout, CDC's updated advice is that adults who have been vaccinated continue wearing masks, social distancing, and avoiding non-essential travel. It feels like the goalposts are being moved. But CDC calls this a first step towards normalcy. It's not normal to ratchet down the freedom of Americans when doing so doesn't help that much. As states begin to remove pandemic-related restrictions, public health officials are warning of a final surge in the virus. A year in, free Americans can deal with it. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View, where we discuss the issues you won't hear about anywhere else, because we are committed to truth, and God's truth applies to all areas of life.
Hi, this is Lee Strobel, author of The Case for Christ and my new book, The Case for Miracles.
You know, one of the best ways that we can grow in our ability to understand why we believe what we believe is to get an ongoing dose of God's truth into our lives. And one of the best ways of all to do that, Kerby Anderson does a tremendous job of giving us a regular diet of evidence, of logic, of God's truth from His Word, so that we can continue to do what 1 Peter 3:15 tells us, to always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks us to give the reason for the hope that we have, and to do it gently and with respect. So I am a huge fan of Kerby. I'm a huge fan of Point of View. I know that you probably are as well. That's why you're listening, and I hope you'll get behind them, support them, so that this ministry can continue on into the future and flourish even more next year than this year.
Lee Strobel, and again, earlier this week, we did talk about the fact that not only we talk about a Christian worldview, but how to defend it. And we've had Josh McDowell on, Sean McDowell, of course, had Lee Strobel. But just before we get back to some of the material and conversation that we're going to have, Brad Fisk with us, and we have a match on the table, which we would like to finish off if we can.
We do. I'm curious, how many of you like strategic giving? I like that term, strategic giving. It's kind of like what you said earlier about, wanting the best deal. Well, it's kind of a blue light special going on right now.
Yeah.
We've got a $14,000 match challenge, and we want to honor those people who have made that possible by going ahead and matching it. And we're just simply asking you to give whatever you can, a single gift, a monthly gift, big or small. In God's eyes, the size of the gift is up to you and your spouse, or you and others, or you and God. Just pray and obey. See what God would have you do. But remember, this is a critical time for us to remain strong. We are the voice of the biblical cultural world, and we want to continue to do that. Please give us a call, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151.
And I want to add even one extra kind of plum or cherry on the top of the whipped cream, which is if you call, you might get to talk to Kerby's wife.
Hey.
She's one of the ones answering the phone.
Oh, that is
so
kind of fun.
You not only can support Point of View and be involved, but you get to talk to Kerby's wife. You can maybe ask her a couple of secret questions.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
and she will tell.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Let me, just before we get into the next issue on religious liberty, come back to Dr. Merrill Matthews, because he'll be leaving in a bit, and we'll be talking with Chelsey Youman in just a minute. But you did a very good piece this week at IPI on blizzards, blackouts, and bankruptcies. This whole issue of electricity and the winter storm, whether you live in the state of Texas, which of course is where your institute is located, or other places, there was a lot of great insight from Robert Bryce, and he is one of the individuals that you had on your special.
Right, and that we had him on for a Zoom special this week, and that is available at IPI.org. It's free. People can go and look and enjoy that. But he's quite the expert on energy, and he goes through the problems that we had, and basically, this won't surprise some of our listeners. He sees government as a major problem that we have with creating the blackouts that we had in Texas, and he's a big fan of nuclear energy. I asked him about some of the mini nuclear systems that they're coming up with. He says that we may go to those, but he thinks it'll probably be 10 or 15 years beforehand. But he also is critical of the clean energy, especially wind power, because Texas is the largest wind power state in the country, and we had a lot of problems with that because we didn't winterize, and that they completely dropped off, and that put a whole lot more pressure on gas and other things. So he's got a number of discussions about what happened, why they happened, and what some solutions might be.
So again, IPI.org, and we have that. And Kelly, that's kind of like your First Liberty Live, because I just think some of these great opportunities for people to just go on to Zoom are very good. But just before we take a break, I wanted to get into this one because there is an appeals court ruling that the University of Iowa cannot discriminate against a Christian student group. And it gets back to this whole idea that because they said, we just don't feel good about letting a gay student be a member of a Christian group because he, by definition, or he or she, I forget who it was, doesn't agree with the ideas of the group. And I thought we had free assembly in this country.
Yeah, freedom of association is kind of important. It's that the idea that people who have ideas that agree with one another can come together and try to do something as an organization. that's kind of what we call churches. So it's a real dangerous when you try to say, well, you can't associate around those beliefs. If you got to allow everybody in, even people who don't agree with what you're associating. It's bizarre. This case is great because it goes further. I don't want to get too technical, but there's a thing called immunity. It's not really written down. The judges kind of created it on their own, which is really inappropriate. But the idea is government is immune from lawsuit, and government officials are immune unless they violated a clearly established constitutional right that a government official should have known about. And in this case, the lower court judge had said, yeah, it's clearly a violation of the free speech and of the First Amendment, but it was kind of unclear about all this religion stuff and everything. And what this federal court of appeals said is, oh, no, They said they did say the free exercise clause stuff, the religious part of this, was maybe not as clear, so we won't hold them that. But free speech, discriminating against one group against another because of their beliefs, that's clear. That's constitutionally established. You're personally liable for this type of discriminatory conduct. So that's really significant because that'll get a government official's attention if they're going to be personally on the hook for violating somebody's constitutional right.
Another example of some of the victories that you probably only hear about if you listen to Point of View.
That's right.
Just think of the number of things we've covered in this last hour that you probably only heard about here on Point of View.
It's breathtaking, even looking at the entire week and all of the topics and subjects. And many of them you're not going to hear anywhere else. They're simply not going to talk about it. And so we're asking you to give and support this voice. We're coming on 50 years. So that must mean something right there. The fact that we've been around for so long, we must be trustworthy to some people, and we are, and we'd love to have you express that with your gift. We have a long ways to go to get to our goal of $14,000 match challenge. That's a dollar-for-dollar match, and it's an opportunity for you, my friend, to join us with every dollar being doubled. You give $1,000, it'll become $2,000. You come in at that $360 for the year, that's $720.
Thank
you very much.
Sorry.
We're just involving you in this. So, pointofview.net is the place to go on the web to give. Pointofview.net. And you can always give us a call. We love talking with you. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. 5151. Give us a call, won't you, with your very best gift.
I might just mention we're going to be switching chairs again, and we're going to let Dr. Merrill Matthews go. So, again, you've had a chance to hear from him, and you can go to ipi.org. And Chelsey will be with us after the break, and so we'll talk about some of the pro-life issues. Have two lawyers in here talking about religious liberty. So, once again, give us a call, 1-800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
That's right, 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. I'll just ask, are you committed to truth, to biblical truth? We are, and we'd love to link arms with you and you with us as together we challenge the things that are simply wrong and unbiblical. You can do that with your gift.
And again, just give us a call right now. This is a perfect time to call, 800-347-5151. You won't miss any of the content, and there's a lot more content coming in that next hour. So please give us a call now, 800-347-5151. We've knocked off about almost $5,000, but we have a long way to go.
Wow, yeah.
Pointofview.net, 347-5151.
I recently threw away a coupon for a free cup of some really nice coffee. Why did I do that? Because when I looked at it, it expired a day earlier. Have you ever done that? Sometimes we miss great opportunities by waiting just a bit too long. Don't let that happen right now when it comes to our work together through Point of View. Kerby is sincerely optimistic. People are getting tired of the false narratives they get every day from the mainstream media. We believe Americans are ready and willing to do what it takes to create a brighter future, but it takes action. It takes being committed to truth, and it takes joining together as a team. Today is that moment. We need you to join us to be part of the team. And the opportunity right now is twice as good because we have a friend who will match double whatever you give. But you've got to act right now and go to pointofview.net pointofview.net/team or make the call 1-800-347-5151. Seize this opportunity today. pointofview.net/team and 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
We are down to the very last hour of the week, Truth Team Week, and all week we've been talking about committed to truth. And so we do encourage you, if you have not made that phone call, if you're one of those ones that are waiting to the very end, this is the very end. If you want to put us over the top, you can do so. And of course, we have Brad Fisk in studio. In just a minute, I'll go around the round table again with all of our guests. But you've been keeping track of the response, and we still have a lot of way to go.
Let me explain for those just tuning in. Understand that this is Truth Team Week. We do this twice a year, and we do it because that is where a portion of our income comes from, is you, the listener, because we are listener-supported Christian radio. Let me break it down for you. Listener, that's you. Supported, that's you calling us with your support at 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. We started the last hour, Kerby, with a $14,000 for dollar match. It is down to only $7,950 to go, and we'll have all of that match into our total. The way it works is, as you call and give, you release $1 out of this match fund into our total. But it doesn't go into our total until it's matched by your dollars. So please call and be as generous as you can. And as you do that, let me just encourage one quick thing. There is a distinctive of this ministry which I so appreciate, and that is we are 100% Bible-based in everything we do. Kerby is a master at bringing biblical concepts and ideas from the Word of God as it fits the everyday life that we deal with. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please consider your very best gift to Point of View today by calling 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. You can also give online very quickly and easily at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
As I mentioned just a minute ago, we are switching out some things. We still have Kelly Shackelford with us, but we also have Chelsey here, who, again, should not be a stranger. First of all, this will be an opportunity for you to hear from her at something other than the Millennial Roundtable. And you're going to be doing another one this Wednesday, aren't you?
Yes, I'll be back next Wednesday to hear her, if you want to hear from a bunch of millennials.
But let me do you a formal introduction, and that is you are the Texas State Director and the National Legislative Advisor for Human Coalition. Matter of fact, these booklets we make available, this one's on the subject of abortion. And this week, Chelsey, we've been talking about some of the legislation in the state of Texas, but it's not the only place where these state legislatures right now are reevaluating, should we have informed consent, a 24-hour waiting period? What if Roe versus Wade is overturned? Can we have a legislation that just clicks in automatically? What about the issue of chemical abortion? You've been testifying on all those issues, haven't you, lately?
Yes, it has been a very, very busy session in Texas. But as you and all of our listeners know, at the federal level, the Biden administration is being extremely aggressive as well to advance abortion policies. For the first time in 44 years, they passed the $1.9 trillion budget stimulus package, but some of that money will fund abortion. And so we're working at the national level, but then at the state level, that's where real pro-life legislation, as you mentioned, gets passed. And Texas is considering a heartbeat bill that's unlike any heartbeat bill that's ever been filed before. And Human Coalition Action, we testified in favor of that. And one of our sonographers from the clinic came, and she played the heartbeat of a 6-week-old child in the womb and a 22-week-old child in the womb, and they were indistinguishable. And she said one of these heartbeats can be ended. and one is protected.
Wow.
So powerful.
You know, Kelly, one of the things we've talked about before is there used to be what was called the Hyde Amendment from Henry Hyde, who was a representative out of Illinois in the House of Representatives. And up until fairly recently, don't I remember that Senator Joe Biden actually supported the Hyde Amendment?
Yeah, that was one of those sad things to watch. Somebody who said that they had a principled position as a Catholic to not, to make sure that their taxpayer money, et cetera, was not going for abortion. And he stood that position until he ran for president. And all of a sudden, one day, this position he had had his whole career was controversial within the Democratic primary. And it took a total of 24 hours for him to completely change his position. And to me, that's when you go, okay, this is not somebody who really stands. I mean, you can't change a position like that overnight for a political reason unless you're just a person who really doesn't stand for much of anything except whatever the political people tell you to stand for. I thought that was a really sad moment for him and for our country, because it seems like we can't find people very often that are in one party or the other that maybe have a different belief that are willing to stand on what they believe. And to be honest, I think Americans are looking for that kind of thing. And what's happened in our country, not only are we pushing abortion, we're sending, taxpayer money to other countries to support it. And it's something that if you did a poll of the United States citizens, they would be totally against.
You know, Chelsey, you mentioned about the technology. We were just the other day reminiscing. Point of View has been around for 50 years, just about 50 years. And there was a time when Marlon Maddox was interviewing John Wilkie and Bernard Nathanson and Carol Everett. And they were talking about videos like a Windows to the Womb and the sonograms. But we know so much more about what's in the womb than we even did, say, a couple of decades ago, and it's really hard now to be pro-abortion when you actually know what's taking place.
That's so true. I mean, I always say truth rises to the surface. I think we as humans, we understand truth and science and what's going on now so much more than we did then. And I actually argued to the Senate during the hearing last week. I said, we now know that child has, not only that it has a heartbeat, but at what point it can feel pain, when there are brain waves going on. We know so much more than when Roe was decided, that there's no excuse to continue the practice of abortion anymore. It's barbaric, and it's something that, we advocate should end.
Again, for those of you that are pro-life, and if you don't have this booklet, we'd be glad to send it to you. These are the kinds of things we send to you.
That's right.
If you support us, even at $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year, because these are the booklets we put in your hand. We're going to talk about social media in just a minute, and all these booklets are available. But again, we send those to you as a thank you. But right now, we need you to help us meet this match.
We do. We have a match, a little over $7,000 to go, and we're asking for your help. I don't know about you guys. The abortion thing is kind of like one of my big hot buttons. And I am so grateful, Kerby, for Point of View watching my back and watching the back of the pro-life movement and reporting what's going on, both the for and against forces. And I believe this is a spiritual war going on with abortion. It really is. And you, my friend, can make a difference for eternity with your gift right now. I mean, God has a way of putting it together. Maybe your gift will save a baby. Somewhere, somehow. I don't know. God knows that. But you can help us right now. Stand tall. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. You can also go to pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net, and you can give there. But please pray and obey. See what God would have you do, even in this area, this terrible thing called abortion.
Well, again, if we are able to overturn that at some point, these pieces of legislation being considered right now, very important. So let's take a break, and when we come back, I want to get into social media. One of the pieces that Kelly suggested, Parler alerted the FBI about potential violence. You mean that one that was closed down? We'll talk about social media censorship, but this is a perfect time to call. 800-347-5151. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Christians and churches are facing significant challenges in America. That is why Dr. Erwin Lutzer wrote his book, We Will Not Be Silenced. It is not only a call to action, but a practical manual on how to address the many challenges we face in a society that is growing more secular every day. He takes some time to explain how we got to our current circumstances. Various forces are working to dismantle the core values that made this country great. History classes and civics classes are rewriting the past so as to delegitimize our Christian values. Focusing on diversity is used to divide and destroy us. We live in a world where free speech is under assault, but he explains that it really should be described as freedom of speech for me, but not for thee. And much of what is allowed as free speech should really be called propaganda. Dr. Lutzer also spends some time explaining how school curricula and popular culture are sexualizing the next generation of children. It is spreading sexual confusion and giving children a warped idea of their identity. He also talks about how socialism is initially attractive to the younger generation, but he also makes the case for capitalism that creates wealth that actually furthers Christian work everywhere. And he reminds us of the threat of those associated with radical Islam who desire to destroy Christianity and capitalism. He concludes by calling for Christians to be bold. Jesus, speaking to the New Testament church, gives a warning to them and to us. We need to wake up and strengthen what remains. Dr. Lutzer helps us know how to live out our convictions against a growing tide of hostility. We should show compassion and gentleness to those outside of the faith without affirming their non-Christian beliefs. And we should boldly preach the gospel and live out our Christian faith. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you hear on Viewpoints by visiting pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. How can we stay committed to truth if we don't even know what the truth is? You are listening to Point of View, where we help you discern truth and live it out.
Some of the callers calling in about what a difference that you've made in their lives, and it's all true. The truth team on Point of View is what you're hearing right now, and that needs and deserves your financial support. All my dear friends that are listening, people who understood when I mentioned Psalm 91, they knew what I was talking about. Well, if you believe those words, we need to encourage this ministry. I truly believe that. You guys are the right ones to be doing it.
Oliver North talking about the importance of supporting Point of View, and we encourage your phone call, 800-347-5151, 1-800-347-5151. Want to talk about social media in just a minute, but Brad, maybe you can give us a little bit of an update. How are we doing?
Right, last hour we started with a $14,000 match from some friends in the ministry, and that has been whittled down. We're under $7,000 now, so we're closing in on the goal line. But please don't pull back. Now's the time to stand up and step forward with your very best gift, and remembering the distinctives of Point of View Radio. I think of the legacy, been telling the truth for close to 50 years. We do not feel led that the job is done, because it's not. And you can help us continue. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. 5151.
Might just mention the booklet that we have on social media. About half of it's on social media censorship, and I need to completely revise it in terms of all the social media taking place. And Kelly and Chelsey, I've got to admit that yesterday I actually said that I have to agree with Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders said that he felt very uncomfortable about the actions by those titans of social media removing Donald Trump from the websites. And I thought, well, even a stop clock is right twice a day. I mean, unbelievable. And you look at Alan Dershowitz, you look at Glenn Greenwald, you look at Jonathan Turley. I mean, the list is growing of individuals that say they feel really concerned about this social media censorship. And Kelly, one of the articles you recommended, and we've posted it here, Parler alerted the FBI about potential violence. You remember when they said, oh, well, Parler, you're not actually doing what you're supposed to do. It's like Twitter or Facebook or something like that. And so they actually decided, first of all, that they wouldn't allow the Parler app to be available through certain various venues. And then they simply said, Amazon Web Services said, we're just going to throw you off. And the argument was that this is a dangerous app. Now we find out after the fact they actually had done due diligence, didn't they?
Yeah, more than that. Not only had Parler alerted the FBI of things they had seen, but there was actually, it came out there was much more activity going on Facebook and on Twitter. And so this whole false justification by Amazon servers and all these people to shut them down was just a bald-faced lie. And if they were really going to do that, they should have shut down Facebook. They should have shut down Twitter. They didn't do that, amazingly. They only went for the conservative one. I wonder why that is. So, what that was not just we don't have just a monopoly. We have a cartel. I mean, we have three organizations that are like, a couple of them, $1 trillion a year, bigger than 85-90% of the countries in the world, coming together to shut down a business. If that's not, a violation of antitrust, then we don't really see that anymore. And it shows the danger of why these groups really shouldn't be allowed to do what they're doing, especially the fact that our Congress is giving them immunity from lawsuit for the very things that every other media company in the country has to be responsible for. They can defame people. They can engage in outrageous conduct. They're immune when you bring a lawsuit. It's really outrageous, the situation we're in right now.
Chelsey, let me come to you, because oftentimes on the Millennial Roundtable, you get talking about social media and the impact. But this whole issue of censorship is a real concern as well. I mean, pro-life ideas don't get out there very often, do they?
Right. I mean, I think censorship at any level is a problem. But specifically, when we're talking about the speech realm, it's usually the government censoring. But right now, when you have what, Kelly, you mentioned is a monopoly, it's one group in charge of all of the public platforms that everybody's using, and deciding what stays out there and what comes down. I think that's really dangerous just for the flow of ideas, the flow of free flow of information, of communication. But there's a whole host. I feel like every week there's a whole host of reasons I'm hearing that these platforms are engaging in terrible conduct. We know that they are helping aid and abet human traffickers. They spread child porn and refuse to take those things off their platforms. But lo and behold, if it's a conservative idea, it's not allowed to exist.
Kelly, one of the things we've talked about before is this book that you and I both have been recommending, Live Not by Lies. And one of the things that Rod Dreher is saying is sometimes we think that it's coming from the government, but he talks about what's called soft totalitarianism. And that's not really coming from the government. It's coming from these titans of big tech, right?
Yeah, that's the difficulty. Is normally we could go into court and file lawsuits under the First Amendment for violation of free speech or discrimination on the basis of religion or whatever else. But this isn't the government doing this. This is not only big tech, it's woke corporations. I mean, I challenge anybody. Give me one of the top Fortune 500 corporations that you can work for and not be forced to agree with some woke diversity council positions. So it's a way where now this totalitarianism is coming through the corporations. Now, I've got some ways I think that could be remedied, because I think what they're doing is a violation of the law. The job of a corporation and the leaders of these, especially the public corporations, these big ones, is a fiduciary duty for the shareholders. And when they are taking actions that cost them money and cost their shareholders money because this is their new religion, they really are abusing their trust and they're violating their fiduciary duty. And I think most Americans would just want the corporations to be corporations and stop trying to force your politics. Well, we're seeing a big example of this week in South Dakota.
There you go.
Right? You've got this bill that everybody in the state is for. I mean, huge numbers. We don't want guys in girls' sports because we actually want girls' sports. Yeah, I don't want a 6'2" muscular guy competing against my 5'2" daughter or granddaughter. It's not right. Well, everybody's in favor of that. And so was the governor, until the Chamber of Commerce and all the woke corporations and the NAACP, the NCAA, got to her. And now she's waffling. Now she's not. She's sending the bill back. So I think Americans are tired of this. They know that, excuse me, but you corporations aren't the ones I want to trust for my morality. Why don't you just keep to the corporation stuff, and we'll leave the public policy and the morality to my church, to my neighborhood, to me, to my family. But that's what's happening. The corporations are sort of trying to take control over the morality of our country, and it's a really bad idea.
Well, again, that's one of those things that, Brad, we've been talking about for some time. I mean, you go back more than a decade when we had Craig Parshall, who was with, at that time, the National Religious Broadcasters, pointing out some of these examples. And some of those in this booklet from years ago were because Mike Huckabee, they took him off because he was doing this idea of buying with Chick-fil-A because they'd taken him off. We wish we had ones like that now, because the censorship is levels that we've never seen before. So we've been talking about it in the past. We'll be talking about it in the future, and that's just one more reason to support Point of View.
It is, and let me just apply that to you who are a grandmother and to you who is a grandfather. And that means you have grandchildren. What kind of a world are we going to leave them as we eventually exit? That's a huge question that needs to be answered, and Point of View addresses that directly time and time and time again. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to rise up and be available in a way we've never had before to get this evil out of our world. That's the best we can. And you can do that by giving. 800-347-5151. Every dollar you give is matched dollar for dollar, and we're inviting you to step up and help us. 800-347-5151. It's a 2 to 3 minute phone call, and you're on and off the phone, and you can go your way. Also, you can give at pointofview.net, pointofview.net. But please, give your very best gift and think about your grandkids.
Let me again let you know that after the break, we're going to get into some more of these religious liberty cases. We've talked about successes in the legislature in Georgia and a number of other places. We've talked about this appeal court ruling. But many of you ask from time to time, where are we with this Coach Kennedy case? Because this one has the potential to really change the way the Supreme Court looks at these issues. We're going to come back and talk about that in just a minute. But you don't want to miss that. So that's why you want to call now, 800-347-5151. Give us your phone call, and it'll only take a few minutes. 800-347-5151. Of course, the website is pointofview.net. We want to get all those lines ringing, don't we?
Yes, we do.
I recently threw away a coupon for a free cup of some really nice coffee. Why did I do that? Because when I looked at it, it expired a day earlier. Have you ever done that? Sometimes we miss great opportunities by waiting just a bit too long. Don't let that happen right now when it comes to our work together through Point of View. Kerby is sincerely optimistic. People are getting tired of the false narratives they get every day from the mainstream media. We believe Americans are ready and willing to do what it takes to create a brighter future, but it takes action. It takes being committed to truth, and it takes joining together as a team. Today is that moment. We need you to join us to be part of the team. And the opportunity right now is twice as good because we have a friend who will match double whatever you give. But you've got to act right now and go to pointofview.net/team or make the call 1-800-347-5151. Seize this opportunity today. Pointofview.net/team and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. So the last half hour of the week. So
Yes.
if you have been waiting, it is come, and it is about ready to evaporate very quickly. Truth Team Week this week. And of course, the theme has been committed to truth, and we hope you are committed to truth. We are. And we encourage you to also be committed to us. If you've been waiting for those last few minutes before we actually say goodbye for the week, now time has come. 800-347-5151. Of course, the website, pointofview.net.
And we have a match challenge on the table, and what that means is we have a pile of money that somebody gave us to use as a match challenge. That money is sitting outside of our total right now. It's not part of our total, and it doesn't get added into our total until it is matched dollar for dollar by you and you and you and you and you. So give us a call, won't you, if you've not had a chance to give your gift, because right now it will be doubled. That's 800-347-5151. We stand for righteousness and biblical truth every single day. Won't you stand with us? 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. Or you can go to pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You know, we've talked about some of these successes in terms of religious liberty, but I thought for just a minute we might talk about a very significant prayer target. We've got two very smart lawyers here talking about this, and one of those has to do with the ongoing case of Coach Kennedy. But for our listeners out in California, they have heard about the Ninth Circuit Court, probably more than the rest of us have. And I guess it's no surprise, but if nothing else, this has been a setback, but you sort of expected it, didn't you, Kelly?
Yeah, the Coach Kennedy case, for those who don't know, is Coach was, as a believer, he made a decision, a commitment to the Lord, that after every game, when people go to the center of the field and shake hands and do what they do, the first thing he would do is go to a knee and give thanks to God for the privilege of coaching the young men that he got to coach. And he did that for 7 years until somebody saw him and thought it was a really neat thing and mentioned it to the superintendent. And the next thing you knew, there was an investigation. And eventually they came down to the fact of telling him in a letter that if he went to a knee again, he'd be fired. And he went to a knee. He was in the Marines for 20 years. And it's like, what kind of example am I for the kids if as soon as trouble comes, I run away from my faith and run away from the Constitution? So we went up. We got the Ninth Circuit, which is, he unfortunately for him, he lives in the Ninth Circuit. And we got a 3-judge panel. And the panel was an Obama appointee, a Carter appointee, and a Bush appointee. And you think, well, maybe the Bush appointee. No, the Bush appointee was a lawyer who spent his whole life defending school districts. So Joe got the ultimate bad panel, Coach Kennedy. And we got a bad ruling that said coaches are not allowed to pray in public if anyone can see them. And which is not the law, but it's what they wanted the law to be. So we went to the Supreme Court. Court didn't take the case. They said, go back down. There's some facts we want established. But the 4 conservative justices wrote a statement where they said they found the Ninth Circuit's decision below deeply troubling and basically sent a signal that this is not going to be acceptable. Since then, we've added an Amy Coney Barrett to the court, so it's probably more than 4 now. Might have been more than 4 already because the chief doesn't necessarily sign on to those things. So we very well might have 6 on our. So we go back. We got the facts established just like we said they were. We went back up to the Ninth Circuit. We had the same 3-judge panel. And what was fun was we were in COVID, so people got to watch it. So normally you can't go into the Federal Court of Appeals and watch an argument. Well, yes. It was online. And so all of our supporters, we sent out and said, hey, you can watch the argument. You need to pray and get behind. And what was fun is you could see the judges and what they were trying to do, and everybody was furious because they could tell this 3-judge panel didn't like the fact that they had been sort of given the back of their hand, and they were trying to figure out a way to cull the facts together to rule against Coach Kennedy again. And so, not surprisingly, they've now done that. One of the main things they pushed in their new opinion was that, the big problem was that Coach Kennedy went out and was in the media. After he was fired. Somehow that's his response. He's responsible because he talked to the media after he was fired, but they were trying to use that as one of the justifications of why he had to be fired. But it didn't happen until after he was fired. So it was a bizarre opinion, not unexpected, and we just know we're going back. We're on our way to the Supreme Court, and this is going to be the opportunity for, hopefully, the Supreme Court justices to issue a really significant opinion, because in that first statement by the 4 conservative justices, they mentioned a precedent called the Smith decision, which has been in place for over 3 decades, which has caused tremendous damage to the free exercise clause. And the justices says, we noticed that your first claim to reach us here was a free speech claim, not a free exercise claim. They said maybe that's because of the Smith decision that has caused so much damage to religious freedom. And they said, but we haven't been asked to review that case yet. So not a subtle hint that we might be on our way to a really significant decision that really opens up religious freedom to all Americans in ways really nobody alive probably remembers.
You know, Brad, Ken Starr was on with us recently. First of all, he said so many positive things about Kelly Shackelford and First Liberty, but he also pointed to that Smith decision, which comes out of Oregon. And I think he's thinking that just what your Bladensburg case did with what's called the establishment of religion, the Coach Kennedy one could address this issue of free exercise. True?
Could be. Yeah, it could be the big turning point. And we're praying for that. And so I would encourage people, number one, pray for Coach Kennedy. I mean, it's not easy to go through something like this for 6 to 7 years of your life, to be waiting, to not be able to coach kids that you love doing. So pray for him, not only that he will get back to that, but that all that he's done to be faithful would turn out to be a blessing to many, many others, which is why he's doing this. This could be really significant for the country. Religious freedom, I really believe this. If we win this case and are able to open up the free exercise clause, really every American is about to have more religious freedom than they've had in their lifetime. And
That's
what
awesome.
a great thing to say, and that Coach Kennedy can look back to.
Chelsey, you've, of course, looked at this as well. You know, you have free exercise and establishment of religion, but almost all these cases involving religion are all establishment cases. This would actually open the door to come back to actually have some free exercise cases, right?
Yes, and I think it's so crazy how 6 years ago we had no idea where Coach Kennedy's case or how significant it was going to be. You know, the political climate was pretty dire actually at the time under President Obama, but it's only gotten worse. I mean, we have seen that any Christian views, any Christian, whether it's in the workplace or in the public realm or politically or even on Twitter, Christian views aren't welcome anymore, and that has only gotten worse since this case started. So I think it's more important and timely than ever that this case get decided and that the free exercise is opened up and those thresholds are changed, because we need those protections.
You know, if nothing else, Brad, sometimes we're talking about significant changes. In some respects,
that's huge.
That establishment precedent called Lemon is gone because of Kelly Shackelford. Maybe this precedent of Smith, eventually it'll be gone because of that. And you hear about it right here on Point of View.
I was thinking exactly those thoughts. I'm thinking, again, another great example of content that is fascinating to me and could change the course of this country in so many ways, but we're not hearing about it elsewhere. And that's okay, because God has called us to fill those gaps. We'll watch your back, but we need your support financially to continue to do that task. 800-347-5151. Match challenge on the table. Let's get that completely cleared up in this next break. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. 5151.
Again, we are trying to cover all sorts of topics that you perhaps will hear nowhere else except right here. And just before we're done, we'll certainly encourage you to go to both of these websites. So you certainly pay attention, because we want you to know more about Human Coalition and certainly about First Liberty.
Yes.
And I might even ask Kelly a little bit about March Madness, because that relates also to this issue of religious liberty in just a minute, because after all, the team of Oral Roberts University, the Cinderella team right at the moment, found themselves being criticized simply because they adhere to Christian values. Who would have guessed, as Chelsey mentioned just a minute ago. So let's get back to that in a minute, but let's encourage you right now. If you're waiting to the last segment, we are now in our last segment. That number is 800-347-5151. Of course, the website is pointofview.net. You can join for $1 a day, $30 a month. You can join at $50 a month, $100 a month, or even if you just have a one-time gift, every dollar doubled, and we'd like to finish off that match just before the end of this hour. We'll be back right after this.
Studies are surfacing that show us how effective the shutdowns implemented in response to COVID-19 really were in saving lives. Were the results worth the dramatic drop in private sector employment, the lost businesses, the foregone dreams? Are states with stricter lockdowns more effective in preventing deaths from COVID-19? Chuck DeVore of the Texas Public Policy Foundation points out that this economic pain should have been rewarded with a lower COVID fatality rate. That's what we were told as we obediently stayed home. Initial indications are that it wasn't worth it. Using COVID fatality data supplied by the New York Times, along with private employment data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Mr. DeVore found, quote, no benefit earned by states that inflicted the largest destruction on their job base. With not much difference in virus fatality outcomes, private sector job loss was 11.9% in New York, 8.3% in California. The decline was just 3.7% in Texas and 5.1% in Florida. And what about mask mandates? A recent report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention states that 73.6% of counties had state-issued mask mandates from March through December 2020. These mandates accounted for less than a 2% decrease in COVID-19 cases and COVID-19 deaths, 100 days out from implementation. Any drop in cases and deaths is wonderful news. But now, with the vaccine rollout, CDC's updated advice is that adults who have been vaccinated continue wearing masks, social distancing, and avoiding non-essential travel. It feels like the goalposts are being moved. But CDC calls this a first step towards normalcy. It's not normal to ratchet down the freedom of Americans when doing so doesn't help that much. As states begin to remove pandemic-related restrictions, public health officials are warning of a final surge in the virus. A year in, free Americans can deal with it. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View, where we discuss the issues you won't hear about anywhere else, because we are committed to truth, and God's truth applies to all areas of life.
Hi, everybody. This is Gary Bauer with American Values in Washington, D.C. You know, I've been involved in big battles in Washington for many, many years, and in those battles, time and time again, it's been Point of View Radio and Kerby Anderson who's provided me with a platform to sound the alarm. It doesn't matter whether the battle was over the sanctity of human life or preserving religious liberty or defending marriage. Kerby Anderson and Point of View have always been there standing strong. That's why today I'm asking you to join me in giving the most generous contribution you can to Point of View Radio. You know, Point of View and Kerby don't get big subsidies from Washington, D.C. like some liberals do. They depend on generous donors like you who believe in family, faith, and freedom.
Again, we are back for just a few more minutes. And, I was just thinking about this, Brad. This week, we've talked about immigration. We've talked about China. We've talked about economic policy. We've talked about the national debt. We've talked about voting rights.
Sex.
Talked about, sexuality quite a bit with Josh McDowell. Military policy. We talked today about abortion. We did the one on cancel culture where Robert Knight said you can't even use the word normal now. Unilever says that you can't have normal hair or normal shampoo because people feel disenfranchised by using the word normal.
And you're not making this up.
And of course, we've talked about apologetics, how to defend the Christian faith, and that's just this week. That's just a typical week. You just think of all the things we cover here on Point of View.
And that's why we're asking you to give. Well, only 2 times in the year do we come to you and remind you that we're listener-supported radio, and we're committed to truth. So let me ask this question. Are you, my friend, committed to biblical truth? If you are, please stand with us financially if you can. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or pointofview.net. And we are just an itsy bitsy. We got a little bit more room in the match challenge. Started at $14,000 last hour, and we're closing in on the finish line. So please give, knowing that your dollars will be doubled, at 800-347-5151.
And one of the things I want to point out, Kerby, is if there's ever a time when people wonder, is there any media source I can go to where I can get valid information? I mean, people really are questioning that. I have a friend who does national polling, and he started telling me about a year and a half ago that something unusual was happening. And it was that the number one issue of concern wasn't the economy, wasn't all these other things. Even during COVID, it was the media, the fake media, that people didn't think there was anywhere they could go and trust the information. And so they didn't even know what was going on or what was real. That's one of the reasons why I think Point of View is so valuable. Everybody knows when they turn on to Point of View that Kerby's not making things up. Kerby is, I don't know what the word I can give. He's like an accountant. I mean, he's like, you're looking over Kerby is so careful. He's studied. Anybody who's been around him know he's not going to say things unless it's been triple or quadruple checked. So everybody knows when they turn on to Point of View that they're getting accurate information. How unusual is that right now? And especially as a Christian, there's almost nowhere you can get Christian information. So, if you care about having this on, and for even other people to be able to listen to what the truth is, it's a great way. We're in the last segment. It's a great way for you to make sure that Point of View is heard by as many people as possible.
Well, again, you are supporting the ministry, you're supporting radio, you're supporting the videos we post, as well as all these articles. Of course, next week you're going to have a Millennial Roundtable, so you're supporting that as well. So lots of topics that we address every day.
I just looked at the clock. We have 8 minutes remaining in the match challenge, by the way. 8 minutes to go, so please give us a call. 800-347-5151. I totally agree with everything you're saying about this guy. I've been around him long enough, and he really does detail right down.
Let's just for a moment mention that we're in the midst of March Madness. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know, Kelly graduated from Baylor and has been watching his Baylor Bears doing very, very well. But I thought I would point out the fact that one of the other surprising teams is Oral Roberts. Mm-hmm. I mean, Oral Roberts, ORU, beat Ohio State and Florida. So you'd think, well, that's a Cinderella team. Everybody's excited. No, not necessarily. Editorial in USA Today really upset about the fact that these players are forced to adhere to traditional Christian values. Now, first of all, they're not forced to. They can voluntarily attend Oral Roberts University. You might think, well, maybe there's a racist issue. No. 11 of the 16 players are men of color, but the concern is that in some respects, ORU is wildly out of line with modern society. Kelly, this is another illustration of what we've talked about.
Well, it's shocking because, I mean, it's not to most people because this is the kind of silliness that we see. But what's disturbing to me as somebody who spent 32 years fighting for religious freedom is how shameless people are that the USA Today would even allow an editorial.
Isn't that amazing?
Of open religious bigotry. That's what this is. This is, how dare we allow someone to participate in the NCAA who has a different religious belief than I do? And I'm like, maybe you need a re-education course on the United States of America. The reason that we came to this country is so all these different people could live in freedom with their own religious beliefs. It didn't matter if you're a Quaker or a Baptist. And by the way, Baptist was a really small sect back then. It doesn't matter. That's why America was formed. Mm-hmm. And so this whole idea is horrible. I would say if any of you out there are like ORU, if you're like friends with the president or whatever, tell them to call First Liberty because we'll help them free of charge if there's any threats from this in any way. This is an attempt to begin to try to bully evangelical organizations, which they are, into moving off their biblical stance. And that's just not what America's about. They've got to stand strong, and people need to stand with them.
Yeah, and again, Liberty University almost won. They may be criticized. How about Baylor? It's supposedly a Christian university. It just shows what's at stake. Let's just watch these games and enjoy them and not bring all this politics into our sports. But I just thought I'd mention that real quickly, if nothing else, when you're watching Baylor play this weekend. I know you're going to be watching tomorrow.
Right.
You'll be thinking of Kelly Shackelford. But we're just about out of time. So, Brad, one last time, give us a chance to encourage people just before we say goodbye.
The final moments are here, and the lines are available for you at 800-347-5151. If you get a busy signal, call right back, please. 800-347-5151. You can also give at pointofview.net.
Let me first of all come to Chelsey, humancoalition.org. We have that link there. You'll be sitting in this chair on Wednesday, right? So that's
Absolutely.
a great opportunity, and we're looking forward to that. Kelly Shackelford, firstliberty.org, but firstlibertylive.com. So you have to get both those right.
You can find firstlibertylive.com on firstliberty.org, so you can find it all from the main website at firstliberty.org.
Well, I thank you both for coming in here today. And Brad, I want to thank you because you came down from Colorado, so you had the farthest to travel, but you've done this with us for a number of years, and we are so indebted to you, the work that you do.
And thank you to this incredible staff of people that the Lord has put together to do such an important work.
And again, I want to thank Andrew and Steve for their help behind the scenes. I want to thank those that are answering the phone, including my wife. If you got my wife this hour, you got a chance to. I went in there and she's just talking away with all sorts of people telling some stories. But let me just very quickly mention that even though we're going off the air in less than a minute, you can still give us a call, and we will still answer the phones. And if you find yourself saying, well, I can't get to a phone right now, well, 24/7, you can go to pointofview.net. So one last time, 800-347-5151. Of course, the website is pointofview.net. It has been a Truth Team week. It looks like it's been very successful. Brad, thank you. And thank you all for being a part of it. But there's still a chance for you to give us a call. One last time, 800-347-5151. We'll see you back here on Monday on Point of View.
I recently threw away a coupon for a free cup of some really nice coffee. Why did I do that? Because when I looked at it, it expired a day earlier. Have you ever done that? Sometimes we miss great opportunities by waiting just a bit too long. Don't let that happen right now when it comes to our work together through Point of View. Kerby is sincerely optimistic. People are getting tired of the false narratives they get every day from the mainstream media. We believe Americans are ready and willing to do what it takes to create a brighter future, but it takes action. It takes being committed to truth, and it takes joining together as a team. Today is that moment. We need you to join us to be part of the team. And the opportunity right now is twice as good because we have a friend who will match double whatever you give. But you've got to act right now and go to pointofview.net pointofview.net/team or make the call 1-800-347-5151. Seize this opportunity today. pointofview.net/team and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.